Welcome back. Today I'll show you how to create better React component with better API. Before that, let me show you how Radix UI builds their component. This is select component. We can select any value, and here this is how they are using those. So this select is imported from Radix UI, and then we have the select.root, select.trigger, select.value, select.content, select.label, select.separator. You see here they are accessing the subcomponent from the select. Now if we check the source code of this select component, so if I go to this GitHub profile and find this GitHub profile of the Radix UI and find the select component, in here if you scroll you will see that the select component first, and this select component is here. It takes all these props, and then we have here the select.provider. This provider is for providing all these values to the children, and then they are rendering the children. They are not rendering the complete functionality in just select component. If you scroll down, you will see the select trigger component. Then you will see select value component, select icon component, then select portal. And if you check, every time they create a subcomponent, they are adding a display name for each component. Now this display name is important. I will show you how and why it is important when we implement this same pattern with our select component. Now let me show you what we are building today. So this is our select component. It has very basic use case. We can just render a basic list item and select a value. If we want a searchable, we can add this search input. We can search any value, select it, and if we try to search, it is not there. We display the no result message. We have this clear button as well. If we click it, it will just remove the selected value. We have the error state, loading state, and here if we don't select a value, you see the error comes, and if we select a value, error is gone. This is the complete feature. So this is what we are implementing. Now if I give you this task to implement this search component, I will show you that how you will implement it. So you will just create a component, you will add all the props, then some state, then some handler, and based on the props you will render the UI. So if you have the loading screen, you display the loading. If you have the clear button, you add the clear button. So based on the props, you will normally design your component like this, and this is fine. This is how I was developing my components. I have developed components, thousands of components like this. But there are some problems with this approach. Now if I ask you that this clear button, I want this clear button before the value. If I give you this task, you will go to the select component, you will say okay, I will add one more prop, or you will add order prop, and based on that you will just add a condition here, like if the prop is there, I will render it there. If it not, I will render it here. So you will introduce one more prop. Let's say I ask you to add 10 more features to this component. You will end up adding 10 more prop to it. So you see the every time when I ask you to add a feature, you go to the component, you add one more prop, and then based on that you add the condition in here. This is not a good approach, because every time you have to touch the code, you have to touch your original implementation, and that can lead to the unexpected behavior, because if you just miss any of condition, it will create the bug in your component and the code will grow. So this is a good approach if you just have 2 or 3 props and then just render the UI. But if you want a really flexible component, a maintainable component, we need to change the approach, and we'll use the same approach as the Radix UI is doing. We'll divide our select component into subcomponent, and then we will implement each single component. So first I will show you how to divide component into subcomponent, and then I will show you how I have implemented it. So I have designed this component, the diagram in here. So this is our main component, and I am calling it root component, and inside it we have this trigger component which triggers the select component, and then we have this content component, and inside it we have the search component, and we have the list of items. And when we select a value, we render the value, and we are calling this value component, and this clear button we are calling it clear component. And if we try to search something, we don't find it, we are calling it empty component. And let's say if we don't select any value, we display the error, and we are calling it error component. And finally the loading, let's say we are fetching some list data from the API and we want to display the loading, we'll add a separate component and we are calling it loading component. So here I have divided this single select component into 10 component. So we'll implement all these component. Now before we implement this, we'll need a state which can hold the value. Like if we select the value, I need to store it somewhere, and I need to have a handler which can update the value, and I need a handler which can search the value. So we need a single state which will handle or which will store all these values and the handler. For that we will use the context API from React. So now let's see our component based on this new approach. So first we'll start with the state. So in the source code, if you open the select folder, we have the select component. Inside it you will find all the components. We'll start with the context first, because this is what we need. We need all these values so we can access these values anywhere inside our subcomponents. So I imported the create context from the React. We created the context in here. Initially it is null, and this is a custom hook, so we can easily access the context whatever we have created here. So this is our context, this is our state using the context API. Now let's go to the root component, because this is what will render on the screen and it will control all the subcomponent. So first let's start with the root component, and this is our root component. It takes these props, and inside it I have added some state and some handler. And then we have this use effect. It handles the click outside. If we click the outside the component, so let's say if I click outside, it closes it. So this is the use effect. It is handling this outside click. And finally we have this UI rendering on the screen. Now in here, if you check, we just rendering the children component. We are not rendering like this, all the HTML in just one place. We are just rendering the children in here, and we have wrapped this inside the provider so we can access all these values in our children. So this is our root component. Next we will need the trigger component, which triggers this list item. So let's see the trigger component. This trigger component, it has one button. It renders the children, and it renders this arrow based on the open or close, and it has this handler and the class name, and if it is disabled, we add the disable prop it here. And if you scroll up, it takes these props. It takes the asChild or the children prop, and in here it is accessing all these values from the context. And this is our toggle handler. It will open or close the list item. And here we are combining all the class name based on based on these values. And in here, this part is important, and I will explain this part when we will learn about polymorphic pattern in React. For now we can skip it. In here we are accessing all the values from the props, and we have the handler it here, and we are we're just passing the rest of the props in here and all these individual props in here. So this is our trigger component. It will just trigger the open of the, so it will trigger this list item. So it will just update the value, and then the list item will handle it. Next we need, so when we click on it, we need to render this component. So this is our content component. If you check in the diagram, this is our content component. Let's see the content. This is our content component. It takes the children only, and it depends on these two values, is open and the search query. So if we click here, is open or close, based on this it will render the item. And if we have the search, so if we search something, it will render a different UI. So it depends on these two values. So if it is not open, it will return the null, and search query, we will come to this one. But first let's check what we are returning it here. We are returning a div, and inside it we have the search element and the empty element and the list of the items. So if we check it here, we have the search element first, then list of items, and if we search something, don't find it, we render the empty component. So here we are rendering all these components. Now let's look at the code first in here. So we need three components: search element, empty element, and the item element. Now this content, it will just take the children. It does not know what it is rendering, like if it is rendering a search component or the empty element or not. It does not know. It just say give me the children and I will render it. Now when we pass the children, we can use this children. Now this children and this children is different. This children is the children that you pass to a component. This children with the capital C, it is coming from the React. If you scroll up, this is coming from the React, and this is a utility object provided by React. So we can loop through each children, or we can count the children. So here we will go through each children and then we will add our condition. So we'll say children dot for each children, check if the child is valid element. So this again, this valid element, it is coming from the React. So we'll check if it is a valid element. Then go and get me the display name. So this is the method. It will take the display name. So if you check here, it check the type and it read the display name value. If it is there, if it is not there, it will just read the name of the component. So it will get the display name. Now the display name is important. If you remember in the source code of the select component of the Radix UI, they are adding the display name in here, and in here we are accessing the display name. So how we are adding the display name? Let's go to the search element. If you go to the search, in here we search component, and here we are adding the search.display name. So what we do, we say search display name, this is my name for this component, and whenever we need it, we can simply say the child and get the child dot display name. So we'll read the display name. If it is a search, we'll update the search element value, and if it is a empty element, we'll just update the empty element value, and if it is not a element, we'll just say push into the elements array, and then we will just we have the elements in here. Now we need to render all the elements. For that we have this map here. So we are going through each element in here, and here we need to check. So this content, it is responsible for two things: searching the element and rendering the element. And if it is not there, render the empty component. So it is responsible for three things. So for that we need to check like if it is a valid element and if we have a search query. Then we check this condition, the text value which is coming from the item prop. The item prop is for the each element. We read the text value. If it is there, great. If it is not, we check if it is a type of the string. Just take the children because it is a string. If it is not there, we read the value. And if we don't find this search query inside our text value, we say no, we did not find it. We just return null from here. It will never reach here, and the visible count will be 0. And if it is 0, we will render the empty element. So we check it here. If we don't find it, we return the no result. But if this condition is false, it will come here, visible becomes 1, and it will return the item whatever we are searching for. So it come in here. If we say, if we just type R, it will say React or Angular because these two contains the R character. So it will just render that particular item, and it will render all these items from here. So based on the search key, it will return null or it will return the items which matches the search. So we are rendering the search element in here. Then we have the rendered list of items. This is the list of items, and if we don't find it, we return the empty element. So if we don't find any element, we return the no empty element. So this is your content element. Next, what we need like if I select a value, we need to display the value. So let's go to the value component first. So this is a value component, and it takes these two props, the placeholder and the children. The placeholder, like if we want to display this, if I just don't select any value, you see this is a placeholder. So we say by default this is the placeholder and the children, and it depends on these two things. So when we select a value, we need to display it, and if it is loading, we need to display the loading. So if you look at here, if it is loading, we return the loading element. Again, we'll we will have this children dot for each loop. And if we have the loading element, great. If we don't have the loading element, default we display the loading. So if you check this one, this is our default loading. And if it is not loading, we just display the value. If it is selected, if value is not selected, we just display the placeholder here. Now let's check this one here. The loading element, by default it is null, but if we provide the loading element as a children, we'll go through all the children, we'll check if it is a valid element and the display name is loading. Then we will say this is my loading element, and if it is there, just render it. Now if we check the loading element, which is here, it just depends on one single value, which is the loading. So if it is a loading, it will display this UI. If it is not loading, it will display none. And this is the display name for this, which we check inside our value component. So we check if the display name is the loading. Now display name, again, it is a function defined here. So we check the display name. If the display name is the loading, we'll render the loading element. So this is our value component. Now when we select the value, with the value we are rendering this clear button. Now let's check the clear button implementation. It's very simple, straightforward. So we read the value, on change, clearable, and the loading, and we just render this span with this X icon or this X character, and it takes the handle clear because it has to clear the value. If we click on it, so it will access this on change handler from our context, and we click on it, it will just set value to empty. Now we are adding the e.stop propagation. Why? Because we don't want parent to trigger some functionality. So we just stop this event right here. And if we look this condition here, it just, if it is if we don't provide the clearable prop or the value or the loading, we just return null. So this is our clear component. Now before we move to any other component, let's look at the demo first. We'll go to this third demo. So if you go to the demo, this is our third demo with the clear. Now let's look at how we are adding the component. So first we take the select.root. Now how we get the select.root? For that, let's go to the root component, and in here we just exporting the root. We have this index.ts file here. In here we have imported all the components. And here we are exporting an object. We are calling it select. So select has all these components inside, and if we want individual component, we can just import all these components individually. But we are just adding everything inside the object. So this is how we can access subcomponent. So if I say select.root, select.trigger, I can access all these components. So if you check in the demo, we have the select.root. So select is our object. You see the select is an object, but it has a root component. So it will render the root component here, and we are passing these three props here, the value, on change, and the clear. And inside it here we have this select.trigger, select.content. Now let me show you the important part in here. So if you check here, first we have the value, and second we have the clear component. But if you remember, I asked you to add this clear button before the value. You had to add some logic in here, some prop, and then based on that you had to change the implementation. But if you look here, we have the trigger, inside it we have the value and clear. Now let's say I want to change the order. Simply I just move clear above the value. So now the order has changed. Now if you save it, if you check this one, you see the clear button comes first and the value comes later. You see how easy it is to compose the UI with this approach. And if I just want to change it, I just change it. See, it just becomes how we want to compose. It becomes very easy to change the order of the UI elements. So this approach is where it gets it just gives you complete flexibility and complete control over the UI. So we say inside the trigger, I want to first the value and then the clear. And then I want to render the content. And you see, we are not, if you look at our implementation, we were passing the options in here, and here we say options and we are rendering options in here. But here we say no, you just take the item and render the value there. This component content does not care about what this framework is, but in here we have to provide the options array of object, and then read the value, the options dot value, options dot label, then we render it. This is hard coded inside the component, but in here this is not hard coded. You say I want a content, and inside the content I will go through my each framework or each data, and then I will just give the value to the item. Now you can add anything in here. You are not just limited to add the label, you can add anything. Let's say if I just want to add some p tag, so I just say this is my p tag. If you just save it and if you come in here, you see you have added this p tag to every component. It becomes very easy. You control what you want to render. You are not just limited to if you look at here, you are just limited to this one, but in here you control the UI, so you can easily change how and what you want to render. So this is how we are rendering our component. Next, let's just go to the with error. So let's see how error component is designed. So we go to the error component. It just depends on the one thing. If there is an error, render this. If there is no error, just render the null. So if we check the demo for this is for error. We say if there is no value, just display this error message. So what we do here, we have no value, so we display the error message. Simple. And if you want to check the complete feature here, like if I just select value, error is gone. If I remove the value, error is there. So for this demo, if you come here, we have the error in here, and here if you come here, you see the select.error component. This error component, let's go in here. See, this is our error component and we are rendering it here. So this is how we can compose our UI very easily. Now next you see the loading component. Let's see the loading component, but before that we have this empty component which we implemented in this with the content. So let's see the empty component. It's again very simple. It takes the children, or default value is no result found, and it takes the class name, and it has the display name as empty. So if we don't find anything, we display the no result. But if we want to change it, let's say in here where is the no result, so in here let's say I want to add some different UI element. I want to have a p tag with the style of color. Let's add the color red. I'll say not found any item. Save it. And now let's say if I try to search something, you see we are rendering our custom error message. So it becomes very easy what we want to render. So we are rendering this custom empty message very easily in here. You see how easy it becomes if we design this way. So this is our empty component. Now let's look at the error component. Again, the error depends on the error and we just render the UI. If we look at the loading just depends on the one component. So this is how we have designed all these components. So we design the trigger, we design the search, item, the content, the empty, the error, value, and the clear, and the loading component. So this is how we have designed each component. So each component we have designed, and they are individually rendering their own UI based on the props and based on the context. So this is how we create a composable UI or a composable component, and then this is how we compose the UI. Very easily we render whatever we want to render. So this is our composable UI. Now next I will explain how to implement the polymorphic pattern. Now polymorphic pattern is, what is this? So if you check the demo, you see this asChild trigger. This is a custom trigger element. Now if you want to check this one, let's go to the trigger component. In here I told you that this one I will explain. Now I will explain what is this. So in here it takes props.asChild. So you see here props.asChild. So if we provide the child, it will render this UI. It will take all the values from the props. It will have the handle click, and inside it we will return this slot component. Now this slot component is defined here. If you check here, it takes two things: children, on click, and the props, all the props. So first it checks if it is a valid element. If it is valid element, we clone that element, we add all the props which we pass to it, and we take all the props from the children, and then we are adding the on click handler. Inside it we have the click handler that we provided, and if there is any click handler on the children, we will just access that and we'll call it here as well. So we are passing all the props and all the handler to this clone element, and we will return that element. But if it is not a valid element, we just return whatever it is. It can be icon or a simple text. We will just return that. Now let's go back to this slot where we implemented this. It's inside the trigger component. So the trigger component. Now there is a different thing. If you look at here, it is a handle click. It is a handle click. But why we are defining this handle click two times? So in here it is a button element because we are rendering a button. So we say if I click on the button, it is a button element. So all the mouse handler of the button, I want to handle it. So this this event, this is an event for the button. But in here it is a HTML element, and we don't know what we want to render it, because when we say as a child, we can render anything, and that time we don't know if it is a button element or it is a link element. So we define here as a HTML element, or all the at that time whatever events are available, it will be passed to the on click handler. So that's why we have to define it two times, because here we know that it is a button, but here we don't know what we are going to render. That's why we have defined it two times. Now let's go to the demo. This is our second last demo. So if you come in here, this is our second last demo. We have the root, then we have the trigger. Inside the trigger, we are passing a prop as child. We are telling this trigger component that, hey, I'm going to give you a child, just render that as a trigger component. Do not render your default button component. So if you check here, it will return our children as a trigger component. It will not return this default button as a trigger component. So we are telling the trigger component, take my child, like this UI element as a child, and render this. You see, there is no handler attached to it. If you look at this trigger component, like if we don't want to render the slot, this custom as child, it has the on click handler, it has the disable, it has all these props. But if you look at here, we don't have any handler, but still it works. Why it works? Because when we say as a child, we take this children, and if you check here, we take the children, we render it, and we take this thing on click handler, we pass it to the slot, we take all the rest of the parameters, we give it to the slot, and then class name, and all these are the props, and this is our children. Now if we check the implementation of the slot, what are we doing? We say take the children. So the children is this. In this case we have this div as a children. So we say take the children. It says okay, I will take the children, I will clone it, and I will add all these things to this children. So I'll add all the props that you provide. I will go and read the props of the children, and then I will add the on click handler. Now this on click handler is coming from the trigger itself. So we define the on click handler here, the on click, which is coming from the props. So if it is there, we'll call it, and if it is not there, we'll just have the children.props.onClick handler. So here we are passing all the props and all the handler to this new slot component, which we are passing from here. So this is how we can create asChild uh, asChild component, and we can render anything we want to render. Now this pattern here asChild, this is called polymorphic pattern. You will find it in all the uh, component libraries, and you will find this in the Next.js, where they render the link item as a child. Like you can find it in almost every popular or framework library or the UI library. You will find this pattern everywhere. So this is how we create a polymorphic pattern. Now we will learn about control versus uncontrolled. Now when we design the component, the control and uncontrolled means it's not like the handling the form and we are handling using the state, or the browser handles the state. This is a different. The control means we let the component handle the state, or if it is like the control means we will pass the prop, and uncontrolled means we let the component handle it. Let me give you the example. So in here, this is a control component. So we can set the value from outside the component. If I click here, it set the value to a view, and this is the uncontrolled. Now let's just look at these two components in the demo. So if you scroll up, this is uncontrolled. Now why this is uncontrolled component? Because we are not providing any value or any on change handler. We say I need a default value and I need a clearable. We don't provide any on change handler or the value. But if you look at this here, we say this is my value and this is my on change handler, and this on change handler we are setting the value from the outside. So we are providing these two things from outside to this root component, but in here we say no, you just handle it. Now if you check the implementation of the root component, here we have the value and the on change. So we have the prop as well, but if we don't provide the prop, what happens? See it here. So the current value, if we don't have the value, like if the value is not undefined, it means we have provided the value, then we just add that value. But if it is not, we just use the internal value. Here is the internal value. So we get the default value. If it is not there, it's empty by default. We say if the value is not undefined, I will use the value, whatever value we provide. But if value is not there, I have my internal value, I'll just use that. And for the on change handler, if you come in here, you check, we have this condition in here. So if on change is not there, we will not call this method. We will just call this one set internal value. So if value is undefined, because we are not passing the value, so we will have our internal state handler, it will handle the value. But if we provide the value from outside, this on change handler, this value is not undefined. In that case, this if condition is false, it will go and call this on change handler. So this is how we create control versus uncontrolled. So we give two options to the user, that either they give the value, or if they don't provide the value, the component itself will handle it internally. So in here we say take these two value for the control component, but if we want uncontrolled, we don't provide any value. This is how we design a control or uncontrolled component. Now why this is important? Because if you want to select value or set value from outside, you can just provide the on change handler and update the value. So it becomes very easy for you to update the value anywhere on the page. So it gives you more flexibility and more control over the component. This is called control versus uncontrolled component. So this is it. For the select component, we have just divided component into all these 10 components. Then we just check each component, how we have defined it. We learned about how to create this asChild, and we call it the polymorphic pattern. You just saw how we define, like how we implement the control versus uncontrolled component very easily by just providing value or by not providing any value. So you have learned about control and uncontrolled, how to implement the polymorphic pattern, and how to create a composable UI. The composable UI, you can easily compose however you want. Now, in here, I just gave you the example that you can just switch between the clear and the value. Like switch means you can move it up or move it down. But to make it more clear, let me show you one more example, which is the card component. So it will become very easy. So for the card component, in here, we have the root component and we have three components: the content, the footer, and the header. And we have the context here for this one value, which is the variant. So we have three: content, footer, and the header. And if you look at the demo, the first is the title, which is our header, then we have the content, then we have footer. Now normally, if you do not follow this approach, like dividing component into subcomponent, you will end up with the same order. You will have no option to change the order. You cannot move this footer to the top, this content to the bottom. You will have no option. But if you follow this API design, this component design, you see here we can move the footer at the top very easily. You see, if we check this second, here the footer is first, then the content, then the header. We have the footer, then we have header, then the content. If we want no footer, we just don't add the footer. You see how easy it is to compose the UI. It is very easy. And you don't want footer, you just say I don't add the footer. But if you don't implement your component like this, you will have to add a prop, like no footer equals to false, then you add the condition to your HTML and then you render it. But in here, you don't have to do it. You just say I don't want footer, so I will not add it here. And here we have the props. We are passing the variant as outline, elevated, and here you see we just render the content only. We don't render the header or the footer. So we have complete control over our component and we can compose it however we want. So so this approach that we just learned, how to create the composable component, it gives us the complete control over the UI and the functionality of the component. Now, if you compare with our first approach with this one, and if you just compare with this approach where we just compose a component like this, you see the clear difference. This is a very flexible and very easy to use, and you can easily maintain it. If you just want to change the header, you know where to go and change. You just go to the header and change it here. But if you have like this, and if you accidentally edit something else, it will break. But in here there is no chance, because the header is a single component and you just add condition in here or whatever you want to do, it will not have any effect on any other component, and it will not have any effect in here, because in here we are not just adding any props. We say this is the content and here is my content for the content component. Here is my header, here is my content for the header component. So it gives us more flexibility. So today you learn how to create all these components and how to create a flexible component API. You learn what is this asChild. We call it a polymorphic pattern. You learn about control versus uncontrolled component, how to design control or uncontrolled component. So this is how you can improve your component design. This is how you can improve your code quality, and this will give you more control over your component. So this is it in today's video. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in next video.